This is a German incendiary bomb. An incendiary bomb is a fire bomb. Now this one didn't explode because it has like a fin on there to keep it upright like that. So on impact, it then bursts into flames. It sends up a lot of sparks all over the place, which are not easy to put out. So this landed flat, and one of the firemen at Spark Hill Fire Station had known me as a little boy, and I used to sit me up on the fire engine and ring the bell and that. He retrieved this and he put it in a bucket of water and got a hammer and hit it hard there, that's why it's bent a bit there, to explode it and to extinguish it straight away and keep it complete. And then he gave it to my mother to give me as a souvenir. Now, this bomb was the first type of bomb that they used. Afterwards, they got a little bit more nasty with them because they were a bit bigger than this, and they put an explosive charge in so that when they were fighting the fire, it would explode in their faces. So after that, they had to get on their bellies from a distance and then try and put it out before it exploded. But that is an incendiary bomb.
Malcolm, I think you were bombed twice in the war, which was really unlucky. Can you explain about that, please?
Yes, I can. I've just shown you an example of an incendiary bomb. We actually had 8 of them. They used to call them baskets because they came down in clusters, and 8 of them penetrated the roof of my home, and they landed in the 3 bedrooms. Now, at the time of the incident, we were sheltering in the public house opposite, down in their cellar. And the barman came down and he called to my granddad and said, "Mr. Smith, your house is on fire." Now, Grandad, for some unknown reason, thought he was joking, so he told him to, well, let it burn then, or words to that effect. And then the barman turned to my grandmother. He said, "It's right, Mrs. Smith, I'm not joking." So she went up with him, and they took some fire extinguishers over from the pub. But by the time they got over the road, the fire watchers had burst the door down and had gone in to start tackling the blaze. And we did keep some of the furniture where you've got all these sort of burn marks all over, spattered all over from the sparks, which they managed to extinguish. And we kept that furniture for some years, but eventually, as we modernised and I got married, my wife didn't want us to keep it in the house, so we got rid of it. But it had served its purpose. My grandmother, before the war started, had got a suitcase and she was buying essential things to stockpile in case a war came. And one of these bombs, she put it on top of a wardrobe, and one of the bombs landed in there and it practically ruined all the stuff she'd saved. Then after that, the house was still habitable until later on we had one of these aerial mines come down and exploded behind our house, and these aerial mines float down on a parachute and they explode at rooftop level, and consequently this particular one blew the roofs off something like 200 houses, including our bakery shop, and of course the property was condemned. You just couldn't live in it after that.
After the raid on the Carlton, I believe your mum was involved in her job as an ARP in the raid on Coventry. Could you explain about that, Malcolm, please?
Yes, it's something that I'll never forget, because the air raid sirens went on, was it the 14th or 15th of November? The air raid sirens went and we were down in a shelter and nothing happened. We couldn't even hear the anti-aircraft fire from Coventry. So we weren't aware where the raid was actually taking place. The next morning, my mother should have been off duty and come home at around about 8 a.m. She didn't turn up, and about 10 o'clock, someone came round, a messenger was sent round from the ARP depot to say that she was still on duty, but they couldn't give us any information, but she'd be home round about midday. So we waited and waited, and eventually they brought her home in a car at 4 o'clock in the afternoon. And the first thing she said, when exhausted as she was, she came in, the first words to my grandmother were, "We must get Malcom away." She said, "I've been over at Coventry all night and they've razed the city almost to the ground." She said it was a terrible raid, and I've been taking casualties all over Warwickshire to hospitals, including Warwick, Leamington and Stratford. And she said, and all I've had to eat or drink in all that time was an apple which an ARP warden gave me at the Stratford Hospital. And she was really exhausted, and she went to bed then, and she didn't have to go on duty the next day. But afterwards she was telling us how terrible the city was, how bad it had been devastated. And she went in a big convoy from Birmingham to relieve them. Now, when I say a convoy, for local incidents, a convoy consists of an FAP car, that's First Aid Party, and you also saw FAP on certain doors, the First Aid Post. And the First Aid Party had four of the ARP workers who rendered first aid initially at an incident. They were followed by another car with one First Aid Party worker driving it, and that car was to carry the walking wounded and put them in the car. And then my mother and other ambulances, they would follow them, so you'd have a convoy of 3 for local incidents. And of course there were 4 stretchers in an ambulance. They had a code that if someone died in the ambulance on the way to hospital, the attendant would call through to the driver and say, "Where are we? What time is it?" And then the driver would know that someone had died. Of course they would have to log that when they got back.
Of course, in the Second World War, Birmingham was a very important city because it had so many important industries. One of these was the BSA, was it Birmingham Small Arms Factory. Do you remember the night that was hit?
Yes, I do indeed, because that particular night, my grandmother and I went over to Garrett's Green to stay with my auntie, just to give us a night's break from being in the inner city. And of course there was a lot of heavy anti-aircraft fire around that area, because that was the approaches to the city and to the more industrial areas. And it was the next morning, as we were going back to Sparkbrook, we were on the inner circle number 8, and as we passed Armoury Road we could see all the smoke, and it looked as if the factory had been chopped in two. And at that particular time I could hear the hum of the German aircraft.
Wow.
And that this would have been a reconnaissance aircraft photographing to see what damage had been done. And of course it was only later that we heard how terrible the casualties were there.
Did you actually observe any of the raids? Could you see, what was it like looking out at night if a raid was going on?
When I didn't often look out, because usually I was under cover, but when we went to Garrett's Green to my auntie, she took me in the kitchen to look through, and the sky was full of bursting shells, which was almost like a firework display. It was an incredible sight. I didn't realise we got so many guns firing.
Yes.
And of course, you know, there was a site at Swanshurst Park. You now have the Billsley Fire Station in the one corner. Well, that's where all the troops were housed there. They slept in there, living quarters were up there. I don't know where they stored the ammunition, but the guns were in a line going down. You've got Yardley Wood Road going the one way. What's the other road going by the side of it?
Brook Lane?
It could be. Anyway, they were in a straight line of 4 guns to a battery, running parallel to the road. And on some Sundays, I used to go with my cousin to watch them playing football. And one of the soldiers told us that there were 2 professional footballers from Scotland playing for that battery. So I don't know if they all came from Scotland. I read that there were about between 90 and 100 guns to cover Birmingham, and most of them would be in batteries of 4. And they, instead of trying to shoot the German aircraft down, the idea was to put up what they call a box barrage and fire into a certain section of the sky to make the bombers go higher or risk being hit by shells. And of course we had the balloon barrage as well, big giant balloons, with a 500-foot steel cable,
Right.
so that if they did come and swoop down to dive bomb, incidentally, there were cases where they did swoop down and try and machine gun the firemen fighting the
Right.
fires in some cases. So, you know, there was always the risk of them hitting one of these barrage balloons.
Malcom, what happened to you after you were bombed?
After we were bombed, of course, we had to split up. My grandparents went to live to lodge at his daughter's house. My mother went into lodgings near to where she was on duty, and I went out to Wolverhampton to a place called Bushbury, which is on the outskirts, and I lived with my uncles for 8 months then. And one night there was a heavy raid on Birmingham, and we looked over what was known as Bushbury Hill, but all we could see was this sort of flame, not the flame, the colour of the fires spread right across the scenery, and every now and again you feel the vibration of the bomb hitting the ground, and you could hear the gunfire. But yet we could stand out in the open there because you'd never reached there. But that's a sight I'll never forget. And obviously I was thinking of my mother then.
Yes.
Yeah. Wondering, you know, if she's all right.
Okay. What happened at the end of the war? Okay, we'll try that one. Sorry. What happened at the end of the war?
My mother and I went into town.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry. You must be so emphatically that I respond. I've spoiled it.
No, it's fine if you start that little bit again.
Saying it again or not?
No, you go on now.
At the end of the war, we knew it was going to be VE Day because Churchill was going to broadcast to the nation. So we had 2 days holiday from school, and my mother took me into town. But although there was a huge crowd in Victoria Square, they didn't seem to be doing anything. Not during the day, they did at night, of course. And so I decided to go back to Wolverhampton to be with my cousins. And because where we lived in Solihull Lane now, we'd moved out to Solihull Lane, Hall Green, there weren't many youngsters around there, so it was pretty quiet. And I went to my cousins, and we were out in the street all night, burning wood on the tarmac, had a big bonfire, and everybody stayed up till about 5 o'clock in the morning. It's something, you know, and it comes once in a lifetime.
Absolutely. Malcom, it's been an honour and a privilege to talk to you this morning. I've really, really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for coming in.
Well, it's been not just a pleasure, it's been a privilege. I mean, war isn't a pleasure anyway, but it's been a privilege to talk of something of the heroics that went on during the war, particularly with people like my mother who survived under fire. It really was.
Thank you.
Thank you.